Today I'm down in drizzly Southern California driving one of the best EVs in the world, and I think the best EV sports car, period. The 2022 Porsche Taycan Cross Turismo. My apologies, I accidentally called this Sport Turismo a Cross Turismo, but I think it's understandable why. For 2022, Porsche is offering the wagon variant of the Taycan in two ways. You can get it in Sport Turismo or Cross Turismo. At the moment, the Sport Turismo model is available only in GTS trim. It has all the body-colored bits that you see on the vehicle on your screen right now. Cross Turismo will have rugged-looking cladding on the vehicle, sort of like a Porsche version of an Audi Allroad. So again, if you want your Taycan Turismo without the go-anywhere cladding, that's going to be in the GTS trim. It's going to be called a Sport Turismo. If you want it with the cladding or you want the extra power, that's going to be a Cross Turismo. This is essentially the wagon variant of the Porsche Taycan, and this is the new GTS trim. As a trim level, GTS has been around for a while, and for 2022, every vehicle in the lineup gets a GTS trim. This is one of the more expensive versions of the Taycan. All of these will be over $130,000. You can also think of the GTS as sort of the entry level to the performance versions of the Taycan. It's kind of a strange statement since the Taycan is all performance anyway, but this has just under 600 horsepower versus 750 in the very top end version. A lot of the styling components are shared with other versions of the Taycan, but you can see that they've been tweaked subtly for the GTS to give this a blend of sort of luxury and sport as far as the look on the outside and on the inside. At just over 195 inches long, this is a little bit smaller than a Porsche Panamera, almost exactly the same size as the Tesla Model S and a BMW 5 Series on the outside. But you notice it is definitely more low-slung than an E-Class or a 5 Series, and that's because this really is one of the only dedicated performance EVs in the world. No doubt you can get a Tesla Model S that will go wicked fast 0 to 60, the new tri-motor plaid model, and it is definitely almost as expensive as some trim levels of the Porsche Taycan. But this becomes much more expensive when you take a look at the very top end trims, and this is much more of a dedicated performance vehicle. The Tesla Model S is sort of a one-trick pony. 0 to 60 is the thing that it does absolutely the best, and when it comes to handling, this is definitely superior, as is the feel of the vehicle. And for 2022, we now have this station wagon variant. And I think it's really, really refreshing that Porsche isn't trying to call this something else. They definitely call it the Cross Turismo, of course, but when you ask the Germans, is it a station wagon? They'll say, of course it's a wagon. Look at this right back here. If you're shopping for a Taycan, this is the version that I would get. We get increased cargo practicality, much more cargo space back there, and a much more practical opening with the rear seats that still fold, and nearly 4 inches more rear seat headroom. Rear seat headroom in the regular sedan version of the Taycan is a little bit limited. It's not quite where we find the Model S or the Lucid Air, etc. This is definitely roomier in the back. And I'm sure you'll all tell me I'm crazy down there in the comment section, but I think this is the sexiest version of the Taycan as well. I love the shapes. I love the way that the greenhouse really tucks in right back here in the rear to give this a very classic Porsche profile, even though this does have kind of a vertical hatch back here. It is a little bit more horizontal than vertical when you take a look at its dimensions, but it's close to a 45-degree angle, which really helps improve the practicality. On the top of the hatch, there's a functional spoiler, little windshield wiper right there, and again, trim borrowed from the rest of the Taycan lineup, but dressed up in slightly different color combinations. Now let's talk about what motivates the Taycan. Since the last time I drove this model, there are a number of additional variants. There are now 2 different battery sizes, 79.2 kilowatt hours or 93.4 kilowatt hours. You can get this in rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive with one motor in the rear, with really uniquely a 2-speed transmission in the back. A 2-speed transmission in an electric vehicle is something that other manufacturers have promised, but as of yet have yet to deliver on. The 2-speed transmission means that the rear electric motor can be more efficient at higher speeds, and it can give you better acceleration down there at lower speeds. The rear-wheel drive model comes in at 402 horsepower. There's then a dual motor 469 horsepower, 522 horsepower, 562, 590, that's the one that I'm driving today, 670, and of course, if you want all the power, 750. 0 to 60, according to Porsche, in this model, 3.5 seconds, although I expect this is a little bit quicker in reality. Unfortunately, as you can see, it is definitely raining out here, so I won't be able to test that today. From an engineering standpoint, the coolest thing about this car for me is that it's the first 800-volt architecture EV in the world. Other manufacturers have followed, and other manufacturers are going to be following in the future, like General Motors with their new EVs, but this is the first, and interestingly enough, it is still the fastest charging EV. We're talking about the number of kilowatts you can jam into the battery. If you have access to the right DC fast charger, you can charge at a rate between 260 and 270 kilowatts, depending on the equipment and the conditioning of the battery on board. On this side, we have just a J1772 charge port for level 1 or level 2 charging. On the other side of the vehicle, we have another J1772 port and the CCS combined DC fast charge ports. You can AC charge on either side. If you DC fast charge, it's just over there on the passenger side. According to Porsche, with the right equipment, you can get this battery from 5% to 80% in 22.5 minutes. If you want to know more about DC fast charging your Taycan, check out another video I have on the channel simply about DC fast charging this. Speeds are incredibly impressive because this will charge incredibly rapidly past 80%, past 90%, past 95%. This is one of the fastest charging batteries available in the United States. Now let's dive into the sticky subject of range. Keep in mind that this vehicle has very wide tires on it. The rear tires are 305 width tires, and on this model, they're 21-inch summer tires. As an engineering company, Porsche is terribly conservative, and as a result, they were very, very conservative when it came to the range figures on the Taycan. The EPA allows manufacturers to derate vehicles electively, so on the EPA test cycle, this actually got a slightly higher range figure. Porsche said, no, we don't think that's realistic, we want to go a little bit lower. That's totally allowed. Porsche also chose one of the 2 testing methodologies that is allowed, and that ends up giving us a slightly lower range than, say, a Tesla Model S. You'll notice that Tesla Model S's tend to get below the EPA range. Taycans tend to get above the EPA range in real-world driving. And that's because of these dueling methodologies that the EPA allows. In essence, Tesla runs all 5 test cycles, calculates their own multiplier, and elects no derating at all. Porsche, on the other hand, runs 3 test cycles, chooses the standard multiplier, and then elects an elective derating to lower the range down so it's a little bit more realistic. What does that mean to you? Well, if you're cross-shopping this with something like a Tesla Model S Plaid, keep in mind that real-world range is probably going to be below what the EPA says on that particular vehicle, whereas with this, it's likely going to be just above or right on target. Front seat comfort is excellent in this GTS trim. We have a million-way adjustable driver's seat, extending thigh cushion, inflatable side bolsters, 4-way adjustable lumbar support, power tilt telescopic steering column, and it's all linked through a 3-position memory over there on the driver's door. As we see in other high-end luxury vehicles, the passenger seat has the exact same range of motion as the driver's seat, including the 3-position memory. When you jump in the back seat, you'll see the big difference between the sedan and the wagon version. We have nearly 4 inches more headroom back here, so even if I put my head all the way back here to the headrest, I still have about 2.5 inches of headroom left. There is a ton of room back here. Even though the designers gave this a really low roofline and it's a skateboard battery pack style EV, there's a pretty decent amount of legroom as well. And that's because Porsche had a trick up their sleeve. There are actually no batteries right under my feet. This is a modified skateboard design with basically cutouts for the rear seat footwells. Instead of batteries there, they double stacked them right under the rear seat. And that gives me a more comfortable seating position where my legs are still a little bit up in the air. There could be a little bit of a higher seat cushion there, I think, for me, but it's still going to be pretty comfortable for most adults. Moving here to the middle, you'll really notice the difference in headroom back here because even here, I still have about 1/2 inch of headroom left, even though these rear seats are definitely very, very bucket shaped. And you also see the other touch available here. This is a multi-module liquid crystal roof. I'll go over this in a bit, but it's divided into a number of regions and it really gives the interior a cool feel with the patterns. If I scoot all the way over to the right side of the vehicle, this front seat's all the way back in its tracks. My feet are a little bit tight under there, but the footwell does open up a little bit and my knees are not quite digging into the seat backs. This is definitely very, very comfortable, especially compared to the sedan. The rear seats fold in a 40-20-40 folding fashion. That's a really handy touch, or I guess you might almost say 85-10-85 because the center section is pretty narrow, but you could still put skis right through there. Of course, there's also a fold-down center armrest as well. In addition to the good looks, the big reason to get the Cross Turismo version of the Taycan is the cargo area back here. Now you'll notice on the spec sheet that this is the same size cargo area that we find in the sedan variant of this. And that's simply because Porsche is a very German company and they like the way that the Germans rate cargo space. And that means cargo space under this rigid cargo divider. Now this is a 2-piece rigid divider and you can pull it out and put more cargo in the back here. So even though this number appears the same size as the sedan, this is considerably more practical because you could put 22-inch roller bags like this in the upright position if you remove this cargo divider and put a lot more luggage in the back of this. In addition, you can fold down the rear seats. They fold in a 40-20-40 fashion, and you can put even bigger items on the inside. If you're the kind of person that wants to drive your Porsche sports car occasionally to Home Depot and randomly pick up a barbecue, you could do that in this. You couldn't do that in the sedan. Going in for a closer look, we have a flat load floor. You'll notice it is several inches below the lip. If we open this little flap, we have access to a small amount of additional storage. This is where Porsche puts the EVSE that comes with the vehicle. No Porsche sports car would be complete without a trunk in the front. So of course we get one here. You can unlock it with a button right there on the remote, and then you have access to just under 3 cubic feet. I could not fit a 22-inch roller bag in here, but smaller items like laptop bags, things like that will definitely fit in here, as will charge cords and other accessories. This is also where we find things like the tow hook, the can fix-a-flat, tire inflator, etc. Also, the cabin air filter is tucked under one of the corners. As we look around the interior, keep in mind that Porsche has tons of different trims and tons of options on each of those trims. So clearly this is not a base GTS. We have the available multi-module LCD moonroof here, which is really, really cool. It does not have a physical shade. It's just LCD like we find in some other luxury vehicles, but the cool twist with this are these independent segments. You can see they run right there from one side to the other in sort of an hourglass shape. The effect is really, really cool. It's controllable via this control panel right here that we're going to look at in a bit. You hit the button for the shade. We then take a look here at the glass roof options. You can choose open, closed, so everything is completely solid right there like that. Or you can choose 2 different levels of dimming. Basically, you can invert the pattern, so you can have it one way or another, and these transitions are real time, so this is not sped up at all. Fully closed, that does take a little bit longer just due to the design. Fully open happens pretty quickly, and again, switching those modes. You can also operate it in sort of a roller shade style, where starting at the front, you can open and close it in different segments like that. That's a really cool touch. This model has red seat belts on all 4 outboard seating positions. The GTS logo embroidered on the headrest, but you can see that the headrest design is different in the back and in the front. There's a little button here to move that headrest forward. The front seats have a very attractive style to them, some shoulder wings there, I guess you could say. Pretty aggressive bolsters on the seat back and seat bottom cushion. Again, the seat back bolsters are adjustable, as is the thigh cushion right there on the bottom seat cushion. Very high quality of parts on this inside. Porsche does a really, really excellent job with all their vehicles when it comes to fit and finish and parts quality. You can really see that everything is finished perfectly in here. When it comes to interior finishes, Porsche has a ton of different options, so this is just one way to equip your vehicle. Over here on the passenger side, we have the available passenger LCD screen. This offers a number of functions, but it is a little bit more limited than I would like. So if we go over here to the home screen, you can see basically what we have here: media, navigation, phone. I can get a navigation readout right there, but you can't adjust the climate control system, and I'll go over why I think that's a little bit silly there. That's the one feature I wish this screen would have. It would also be kind of cool if some manufacturer would give us a 2-screen Apple CarPlay setup that's allowable by Apple, but it's not featured in this vehicle. We have clock up there at the very top. This particular model has the Sport Chrono option on it. This is the main screen for the infotainment system. This is also where you would adjust certain vehicle settings. And then below that, we have 2 large air vents here. This is the shifter for the vehicle, sort of a toggle style. Drive down there, reverse up like that, park right over there. Again, those 2 air vents, and then the large climate control screen here. Hitting the menu button here will bring up the climate control menu on this screen, and this is where you can adjust the air vents, sort of in a Tesla-like fashion. You have to move that little circle around. This is one of the reasons that I wish climate control was available on the passenger screen, because if the passenger wants to adjust their air vent like that, they can't do it on their own screen. They have to occupy that middle screen. Dual zone climate control up front, 2 extra zones in the back on this particular model, and then this section is a touchpad controller, so you can use the touchpad to interact with that screen up there if you'd rather do that. 2 big cup holders back here. I had no problem fitting large American takeout drinks in here. They're decently spaced apart. This is what the key looks like. It's very like the one that we see in the Panamera. There's a button to open the front trunk and the rear trunk right there. And then under this floating center console, we have a decently sized storage area, but it's not quite large enough for large tablet computers. In the center console here, this opens to the back right like that. And there are 2 USB ports inside, just about enough room for some of the larger smartphones. You can see that just barely fits in there. This is also where we find the Qi wireless charging mat. There's this little flap right here that holds your phone against the charger. You can see screen faces out is the direction there. On the driver's side, we have this enormous curved LCD instrument cluster. This is one of my favorite features on this vehicle. Now, I am driving a European spec vehicle, and it doesn't have the American maps loaded on it. So rather unfortunately, I cannot show you that display, but you can get essentially a full screen of mapping over here in this display, and a full screen of mapping right there, and a full screen of mapping over there on the passenger side. The curved nature of the screen and its high brightness really gives it an interesting look, especially from the driver's side or from the front side from the passenger over there. There's some touch buttons on the side, so stability and traction controls, that button there, suspension, ride height over there. There's also a favorite button that can be programmed to various things. Right now, it's programmed to change the source. We also have a favorites button on the steering wheel, so you can do that either way. Over here on this side of that LCD, we find the controls for the headlights. The steering wheel is an attractive design. The only thing missing, in my opinion, would be regenerative brake pedals. I would love to see Porsche include something like that because that would give you a little bit more control over the regen braking in this vehicle. I'll talk about regen braking, of course, a bit more in the drive section. Some buttons over here on the steering wheel, volume, up, down, favorite button. This does alter the way regen happens. You can turn it off, you can put it on auto, or you can put it on on. That is simply throttle lift-off regen. It does not affect the actual regen braking. Over here we have a drive mode toggle. You can see it toggles through the various drive modes right there on the screen. This button and this scroll dial right here, those control that screen itself. We then have a dedicated phone button and then a back button for that display. You can see this is an attractive round steering wheel. Cruise control over here on this stock. Unfortunately, due to the weather down here, I haven't been able to do any unofficial performance testing, but I have absolutely no doubt that this will go a little bit faster than the quoted time, which for this model is 3.5 seconds 0 to 60. And I say that because the last time I drove the Taycan, which happened to be out in Europe, it was definitely faster than Porsche's claim number. Porsche, again, is a very conservative engineering company, so they want to make sure that if they say this will do it in 3.5 seconds, that everybody will be able to do 0 to 60 in this vehicle in 3.5 seconds. And there is just so much power out of this vehicle, and the way that Porsche has tuned it, it is an incredible amount of fun. It's more fun than simply that 3.5 seconds would indicate. One of the big things that separates the Taycan from other performance EVs and really puts this in the performance EV category of its own is the way that Porsche thermally manages the battery pack. It's actively heated and actively cooled for optimum performance and optimum longevity. Repeatable performance really is Porsche's thing with the Taycan. If you want to be able to take your EV to a track and have the same track time lap after lap after lap, this is the vehicle that you're going to want. Other EVs that are performance-oriented, like again that Ford Mustang Mach-E GT, in order to get that level of performance that's repeatable, they actually have to derate things. So when you're in the unbridled extend mode, it's not producing maximum power, and things are definitely a little bit different in this. Now, of course, Porsche still has an overboost mode where you're going to get even more shove, and that's where you get the maximum power output from this system, but it's going to provide that maximum power output still for longer than other EVs out there. Next, let's talk about braking. Obviously, braking distances are insanely short because we have some seriously wide tires on this vehicle. The last Taycan that I was able to drive, which was a viewer-provided model, I stopped in under 100 feet. It was 98 feet, which is incredibly short for an electric vehicle. Remember, this is pretty heavy. The Taycan's curb weight is pretty up there with Porsche's crossovers and SUVs, but this has incredible driving dynamics because the center of gravity is very, very low. They put seriously wide tires on it and summer tires on the model that I'm driving today. But the big thing you need to know about the braking in the Taycan is that this is a blended braking system. This is not a friction-only braking system like we find in the average Tesla. And that's something that a lot of shoppers are a bit confused on. In a modern Tesla, when you press on the brake pedal, friction braking is all you get. You do not get increased regen braking. Regen braking is set via the control panel. It's only in 2 levels, high or low basically, and it's throttle lift-off regen only. Throttle lift-off regeneration in this vehicle is adjustable. There's auto, there's on, and there's off. Auto mode bases the amount of throttle lift-off regen on the traffic around you, if you have the radar sensor, the terrain, etc. in your driving style. I think the source of confusion for some folks is that this does not offer a one-pedal drive mode at all. I'm totally fine with that because my right foot is capable of moving 5 inches left and right from the accelerator pedal to the brake pedal, and I would much rather do the braking myself. Sometimes aggressive regen brake modes, throttle lift-off regen brake modes can be entertaining, but if I'm driving the vehicle hard out on my favorite winding mountain road, I want to be in control of exactly how much braking I'm getting. And Porsche has done an excellent job blending friction and regen braking with this vehicle. This can regenerate about 270 kW back into the battery, so as far as regen braking ability, this is still king in the world. This can put more power via regen back into the battery. It's simply commanded differently. Handling is more than an absolute grip number, which is, for the record, absolutely insane in this Porsche. It's about the integration of all the vehicle systems together. How does it accelerate? How does the brake pedal feel? How does it enter a corner? How does it leave a corner? How engaging is it to drive? And how difficult is it to tell exactly what the car is doing at any one moment? And all of that is excellently tuned. So far, everything that I've talked about is exactly what you would expect out of a Porsche performance vehicle. But what you might not expect is the ride quality in this, which is absolutely excellent. Even in the Sport mode, where things are firmed up, or Sport Plus, where things are firmed up even further, The mode is very livable. This is not the best paved road in the world. I have actually driven this out on really smooth roads. I've driven it out on the Autobahn at over 150 miles an hour. It is smooth in pretty much every situation that you can throw at this. What's impressive about that is that this is still a big battery electric vehicle that's pretty low to the ground, so there's not a lot of suspension motion to damp the weight of the Taycan. And this lacks the firm and bouncy feel that we find in a Model 3 or a Model Y or a Ford Mustang Mach-E, or insert pretty much every other big battery performance EV without an air suspension into this sentence. A combination of relatively high curb weight, high tire pressure, and relatively limited suspension travel means that a lot of EVs have that very similar feeling. But again, this does not. And if I put this in its most comfortable suspension mode, it is still definitely taut enough to have a ton of fun out on a road like this. But if it's a poorly paved winding mountain road, this is more comfortable, while still giving you the control, the sportiness, and the handling ability that you might be expecting. As impressive as the acceleration, braking, and handling numbers are, and they are definitely impressive, I am personally more impressed by the ride quality in the Taycan and the fact that this can give you all of those at the same time in the same vehicle with what really truly appear to be no compromises at all. When it comes to cabin noise, again, I don't have any official testing equipment with me, but I have definitely been impressed by the quietness of this cabin. Again, given the fact that we have 305 width tires in the back, and these are relatively noisy summer tires. This is definitely noisy on the outside when the car is passing by, but on the inside, it is definitely quiet. Electric sport sound is what Porsche calls their augmented audio on the interior. This is based supposedly around noises that the electric drive unit is capable of making, but they've been taken out, digitized, altered a little bit, amplified of course, and then played through the speakers in the vehicle. Some folks are offended by that. Personally, it doesn't bother me. You can turn it on and off, or you can have it linked to the drive mode. As far as MPGe numbers from the EPA goes, yes, this definitely comes in well below a number of other electric vehicles, but I'm still going to give it a B when it comes to fuel efficiency. Now, it is definitely true that in some climates and some driving styles, you're going to get under 200 miles of range, especially in the sportier versions of this, and the ones with the dual motor setup, of course, but I still consider that pretty good for what the Taycan is. This is a very, very sports-oriented vehicle, and with that does not necessarily come efficiency. Even though it has been raining all day long and I haven't been able to push this as hard as I'd like out on some of these fun winding mountain roads, it's safe to say that this is absolutely one of the most fun vehicles that you can buy that plugs into the wall. If you want to get your hands on a GTS, these should be on dealer lots sometime spring of 2022. However, there's likely going to be a 6 to 12 month wait if you were to actually place an order today. For 2022, the pricing range of the Taycan ranges from a base of $82,700 that will buy you the rear-wheel drive model with 402 horsepower on up to a starting MSRP of $187,600 for the Turbo S Cross Turismo that will go 0 to 60 in a rated 2.7 seconds, probably a little bit faster in person, 750 horsepower with dual motors. This is somewhere in between those two worlds at a still fairly pricey $131,000 for the sedan version, $133,300 if you want the wagon. And the wagon is definitely the model that I would get. The extra $2,300 buys you a ton of additional cargo practicality and, most importantly for me at least, the few inches of improved rear seat headroom. And that was really my only major complaint about the interior of the Taycan the first time that I drove this back in Europe. I had the sedan version. The rear seats felt a little bit tight to me, mainly because of the headroom, and this has absolutely completely solved that problem. And then we get the extra practicality of that hatch in the back and the bigger cargo area. While I'm sure that a professional driver would tell you that there is a very slight penalty probably for getting the wagon over the sedan in terms of driving dynamics, you're never going to notice that, and for me at least, this is simply the best version. At least for the moment, I think the GTS Cross Turismo is the best trim level of the best version available right now. Yes, the Turbo S Cross Turismo is faster. I do like some of the touches on that Turbo S model, but it is definitely more expensive. It starts at $187,000. That's significantly more expensive than this. It will get you faster, of course, 0 to 60, but I like the sweet spot here. That's probably going to be a little bit more expensive to insure and possibly keep around because I might get myself in a lot more trouble with that model, and I think nearly 600 horsepower is just enough for me. It's also worth noting that Porsche put one of their larger electric motors in the rear. So even though horsepower is detuned slightly from the next level up in the lineup, rear torque is the same because it's the same electric motor. To be honest, bottom lining this Porsche is incredibly easy for me because there are really no other full performance EVs on the market just yet. A lot have been promised, but at the moment this really stands alone. As I said at the beginning of the video, I really love the Model S. The Model S is a great value. It's definitely going to be less expensive than this. It's going to be a little bit roomier on the inside. Depending on what you're after, it may be the right vehicle for you. It will definitely go 0 to 60 incredibly quickly, insanely fast. This comes across as the more precise, sportier, and yes, more Germanic option available. But the Porsche Taycan also has a bit of a split personality because when you put this suspension in its most comfortable setting, this is an excellent daily driver as well. And Porsche acknowledges that the vast majority of Porsche owners are daily driving their vehicles, especially when it comes to their four-door vehicles like this. So they really wanted this to be daily driver livable. It has an extremely comfortable suspension, even though we have pretty low profile 21-inch tires on this vehicle. It's definitely comfortable out on the open highway, even poorly paved highways down here in Southern California. Be sure to let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section below, and what would you get if you were shopping around this price tag. I have to admit, I would be really torn between this and a Mercedes-Benz EQS. The two vehicles are absolutely nothing alike. The Mercedes and the Porsche are the pinnacle of EVs in two different ways. The Mercedes is opulent, it's luxurious, it's comfortable, it's quiet on the inside, it has a really long range, high efficiency, somewhat questionable style, I would admit, on the outside. This is the sexier option, it's the sportier option, it's more dynamic, it's faster, it's tighter, it's more engaging, it's definitely more connected to the driver. And that's why, for me at least, these are my two absolute favorite EVs, as long as cost is absolutely no question. And that's certainly the kind of customer that Porsche is after with this. Let me know what you think about that. Find me over at facebook.com/AlexNautas, Instagram, Twitter, all those other social places, and I'll see all of you next week when hopefully it's not raining.